So thank you very much, Jaipur Bookmark, for giving us this opportunity to talk about something which should be concerning all of us, and it doesn't concern us enough. And I think we'll go straight into the session because there is much to be said, and we have many eminent people here who have experiences to share, which will hopefully clarify for us whether it is necessary at all to have a reading policy, and if it is so, what might be the best way to go find it. So I think just to sort of give a context to our discussion, the ASAR report, which Pratham, my parent NGO, brings out every year, has for the past 10 years shown that children going to primary school are unable to read at their grade level, to the extent of 50% of children in the country not being able to read a grade 2 text if they are in grade 5. And these results have been fairly consistent over 10 years. They have either been bad or they have been worse than bad. So the percentages of children who should be reading at a certain grade level are actually dropping as time goes by. So I think this panel discussion in that sense is not happening a day too soon, because something like a reading policy seems very prescriptive, but unless there is an environment with contributions from everybody, including civil society as well as the government, to actually put the focus squarely on learning outcomes in school, of which reading is such a significant part. I'm going to be really moderating this discussion within this framework, where I think that it's important for everybody to be worried about our children not reading as well as our adults not reading, therefore. In that, we know that there are several stakeholders, whether it's from the education sector or from the publishing sector. And in that, to frame policy, if we all have to sort of find some common ground as to frame a viable policy, an implementable policy, and a policy which doesn't get lost in the thickets of several ministries and several sort of bottlenecks that crop up for anything at all that we try and implement in the country. I think it's important to debate that issue and try and understand what are the best ways to get there. So first I'd like to invite Oliver Moystad, who has some very interesting experiences from Norway. And while we were just discussing in the other room what we are going to say on the panel, I felt somehow that if we asked Oliver to go first, we'd set the benchmark terribly high, and we'd all get very depressed and say, oh, we'd never be able to do that in India, and never mind. But when we said that, no, I think what he has is a really interesting model, and which perhaps does have relevance for us as well, whether it be at the same scale as what they do in their country or not. But I think it would be interesting to hear what the Norwegian government does to make reading a sort of viable activity across the country, across sectors. Oliver.
Thank you. I can start a bit somewhere else than we were talking about, because, can you hear me with this?
Yes.
Okay. Because, of course, the situation in Norway is very different from India. Literacy is not a problem. But of course, children still need to be encouraged to read. And there is a program in the schools to make the children, oblige them to read at least 1 or 2 books a week.
Can everybody hear?
I can use that one if that's better. Can someone help me to take this off?
National policy on
Microphones.
Yes.
Please.
This is better, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to encourage children to read. So there is one program in all schools that the children are obliged to read 1 or 2 books a week and come back to school and report what they have read and read aloud to the other students in the schools. Because it's not generally a problem, but we have like 10% immigrant population, many of them Pakistani, and they often have this problem of being bilingual. So how good are they in Norwegian? How good are they in their native language? That is a problem that very often they have not gone to kindergarten, so they come to school not being very good in Norwegian. So they have to be especially encouraged. So that is actually a situation, it just came to me now, that is a bit similar to what you can experience here in India. So a special focus is done towards these children to make them literate in Norwegian, and also as extra in their own languages. But the background I was going to give was a bit different, that in general today reading is very high, of course, in Norway. As I said yesterday, the average Norwegian reads 16 books a year, excluding textbooks. I forgot to say that yesterday. So reading is very popular, it's very high. But this has not always been the case, that it's been that high. And over the years, the Norwegian government has done several things to encourage writers to write, publishers to publish, and readers to read. One thing is there's no VAT on books. Book prices are fixed, at least the year of publishing, till May the next year. And there's a set of agreements between publishers and writers so that contracts are fixed, royalty are fixed. It's easy to publish. But the most important thing, which I think is special for Norway, I've never heard of it in any other country, is what is called, not very sexy, the state book purchasing system. It was introduced in 1965. When I talk about this, people very often say, it's no problem for Norway, you're so rich, of course you can do this. But Norway was not a rich country in 1965. What they did then, they saw that reading was going down, writing was going down. After the generation of Hamsun and Undset and very prolific writers, there were not so many writers coming up, and they were afraid that this small language would kind of not manage to withstand the pressure from the Anglo-Saxon world. So the state decided to introduce this program where the state buys 1,000 copies of Norwegian fiction writing of a certain quality, which means most of it, and distribute to the libraries, in addition to what the libraries buy themselves. And every Norwegian community has a library or more. So this means that it gives the publishers the security to publish, and the writers the security to write, because 1,000 copies isn't that much, but it makes it possible you have a viable first edition. And over the years, this has been extended to children's books. Then they buy 1,550 copies of about 100 titles, also smaller programs for non-fiction and translated fiction and non-fiction. So this program has been stable for many years, and it has, I think it's a very important basis for the quality of Norwegian writing today, which is very good for such a small country, because it has given the stability and the possibility to experiment, for writers to try out and to develop over time, and for publishers to publish new voices and continue publish their writers. And it has made literature and reading popular. So today, writers are looked up to, and there are important parts in the discussion, in the ongoing debates. They have this program where writers are sent around to schools to meet the children, talk to the children, read to the children. So there are many small and big parts making a program to make literature and writing and reading part of everyday life.
So that's really like creating a rich ecosystem around reading where it's a win-win for everybody. And it really incentivizes people to become writers should they be so inclined. And I think it's support for the publishing industry, and basically all readers benefit therefore. Exactly. Right? And I think the fact that you're also going to schools and ensuring that the writers and the readers meet face to face, that's important for both people.
That's very important. It also encourages the writers to meet the audience, to see who they are writing for.
So if I may now turn to Sikandar Sahab, in the light of whatever we have, Oliver actually touched upon many interesting things. He talked about the onslaught of the Anglo-Saxon world on a small language like Norwegian. In our country, we have very many more languages than just a small Norwegian or whatever. We have several languages, big and small, yet we are not very successfully withstanding the onslaught of the Anglo-Saxon world if we argue within a certain framework. But everybody cannot hear me.
Volume has to be...
National policy on microphones definitely needed. Right? No, so what I was saying was that Oliver touched upon creating a rich ecosystem around the whole act of reading, where everybody in different sectors contributes to create an enabling environment. So if we could ask Sikandar Sahab to sort of talk from the point of view of what we can do in India, which is a multilingual society, where we need to look at our multilingual resources as resources rather than a problem, which we often tend to do. And how does that sort of interface with the whole publishing industry to ensure that more and more people have access to reading material, quality reading material, whether it's in terms of more bookshops being around in smaller cities, whether it's in terms of book purchase in government so that children have access to good books, and whether the government can be more supportive to the publishing industry as a whole. So, you know, whatever are your experiences and your thoughts, it would be nice to know.
Thank you, Manisha. First of all, I thank Bookmark for giving this opportunity to NBT to organize this session, because the subject is such it's a deep knowledge is required. It cannot be discussed in 1 or 2 hour session, but nevertheless we have to highlight a point. So that is the reason we are raising this very important core issue, which is going to affect the entire society, government of society in India. And secondly, I am not a publisher nor an author, because I am an administrator and working in the National Book Trust, but I am coming from the university system. So, but I worked with about 6 years in school education sector. Once I was even appointed an education officer in Kendriya Vidyalayas, but I lost that opportunity and joined the university. So I have an 20 years experience in education sector and talking into various forums. So my spirit is how to spread this knowledge through books to the bottom of the society. Here the numbers is Norway model, we cannot adopt it, but the good policies, whatever the lessons they learned, that could be adopted in India. So I will, of course, I will compare China with when we talk about the figures and the situation in India. Everybody agree, any civilized country, the books are the very important source on energy, diet, I will say. So here somewhat it is missing. It doesn't mean we were not having bookshops or library in earlier days, but there were during the national movement when we were finding for our from the pre-nationalist movement, then there were libraries and there were books from even Bangla books were easily available in each and every languages and each and every villages through library. But here the situation is different. Somewhat the government has missed a point. They are all talking about the education. We have an education policy which was framed in 1986. Thereafter we had a review program action in 1992. Always we are talking about education, elementary education, secondary education, adult education. What about books? We have so many, we have now 5-year plans. We are all talking about increasing the school enrollment ratio and creating more and more infrastructure in schools, especially villages. But what about books? And here, whenever we are focusing on books, some funds are released by the central or state government to libraries, and then we are waiting with books at the library, people to come. The student never come to library for read. Here my approach would be, why can't we take books to the people? Here the case, it is not the 2010 survey, what we, NBT and the National Council for Applied Economic Research, that was the first ever survey on book, reading habits done in the country, which identified only 25% of the surveyed youth are readers. Reader includes, they read books, sometimes they read newspaper. So what about 75% of the population? If we talk about the number, they are very huge. I have a presentation here. I only talk about couple of things on the figure only. We are spending 4.17% of GDP for education. What about, there is no separate allocation for promotion of reading habits. The National Book Trust, although it is a very old institution, it is a part of higher education. But when we work, we are at the tail end of the government, and with a municipal budget, it's not even constitute 1%, not even 0.05%, it comes only. So there is a need for separate allocation, focus area, and this survey clearly said if the right endeavors are put on stream in advance, India's vibrant youth population could truly be used as a nature's gift, which we are not taking those opportunity. And the position in 2010 in India was the same as it was happened to China in 1980s, the same position. So what China made, they made a huge investment in human resources and create an environment for reading, so that they made all their workforce, very engaging and very employable. And there were models. Now we are talking about Gujarat model, which Professor Avdhesh Kumar will be covering. Vanche Gujarat movement, how NGOs and people, members from the civil society, has pressurized the government to take up the issue for reading habit. Ultimately, it attracted the present Prime Minister Narendra Modi when he was the Chief Minister, and he himself approached the NBT. He was talking to me and asking, could you do a program of, we would start a book fair and make it like a Kolkata book fair. So there are things people started thinking about this line, but it's not only government will do, because at large it's in a huge, we have a huge population, but it's everybody has a responsibility, like Pratham or any other NGOs or any corporates, all through CSR or other activities, they have to join hands together. At the same time, we have to pressure the government to create a policy. There are thrust areas I will be covering in the next round. And if you want to see the figure, I will only touch the figure. We had around, in the 2010, we had a literate youth, the age of 13 to 35, it's 333 million. Means 25% were identified as readers, it comes to 83 million. What about 250 million? We never cared about that. And the growth of population is 1.97%. The rate of growth of reading is 2.45, just above the level of population growth, but it is 3.15% in the case of urban areas. In the case of rural area, it is only 2.11. So it doesn't mean people don't want to read. We are unable to reach them. We have to find ways and means. And my only my emphasis is, it's not only government's baby. Everybody is to take around, and so that the result could be happening. Manisha.
So, beyond all these statistics, which often lead us to a state where we are unable to think about the simplicity of the problem. When you talk about employability and what happened in China. Skill development. So, if we are talking about a reading policy and books, I think we really need to open up the whole question of what do we mean by our educated young people? I mean, whom do we see as educated? Whom do we think of as an ideal educated young Indian? What in our education system actually expands the definition of education? And all of us who have gray hair, when we were growing up, we thought that books was a great way to sort of get there, in the sense of, if you really wanted to widen your perspective on how to use the more instrumentalist aspects of our education into something richer and bigger than mere employability, then books was a great medium to sort of up the whole idea of education. And you're absolutely right that the government can do only so much in terms of investments and sort of all the hard decisions which will create institutions where certain things can happen. But it is really incumbent upon every one of us to ensure that the definition of education does get expanded so that we get more rounded citizens, or we at least have a conception of who's a good Indian citizen and why. I mean, to give a completely unrelated example, I believe in North Korea, every student has to learn one musical instrument and play one sport, regardless of how good or bad they are at it, but at least they have some sort of a conception of what a young person from Korea should do. So at least both halves of your brain are kind of tickled if you have to do both of these things, so it's a good thing at the end of the day. And we may have other ideas of what North Korea is all about, but at least they have some conception. Whereas we sort of worry about, how much percentage of the GDP and so on and so forth, and we sort of get lost in that, and we lose sight of the larger, simpler questions which really should be informing these debates, and then perhaps inform policies so that we do things which are, sort of somewhat larger in vision. I'd request Professor Avdhesh Kumar, especially in the light of his experience with Bache Gujarat, to give us some more examples of where different kinds of people have come together to sort of worry about the seminal question of what education should do and the role of books in that, and the role of reading.
I think only one mic works. Yeah, thank you very much, Manisha ji. Before I come to this, 2-3 basic issues I'd just like to put. One is that we are in a purely speculative enterprise towards a national education policy. So let me not be miser in speculation. Second thing is that I become slightly skeptical whenever the term policy is brought. For many reasons. One is that there is a policy splurge in our country. We have policy for everything. And we know that in some way or other they have not been able to deliver the objectives that were enshrined in them. And the reason for that is that perhaps policy involves funding. Funding means utilization. And that means, entire, what I should say, governed mentality comes in picture. Not just government, but governed mentality comes in picture. And one policy intrudes on the other policy. So therefore, when we think of this national policy for reading, we have to think the way it intrudes upon other policies, or as and when whatever model we suggest, all those policies have to be kept in the mind.
Give us an example.
Yeah. So despite the fact that policy reminds me of policing, the fact is that for a country like ours, which is too vast for certain segment to succeed in making Indian democracy a democracy of literates, and a democracy of well-read people. If that is the case before me, then I keep my skepticism aside, and I see that there is no other way but to have a policy, national policy for reading. Because in 17th century, Bacon could say, reading maketh a full man. But if I quote him today, you might find me off the point, because today, without reading, survival is not possible. Survival of humanity and democracy is not possible. So, a vast country like India, with crores of people who would be illiterate, or on those who are literates but not reading, or somehow not having access to books, cannot be allowed to be in that condition, because India cannot afford democracy of illiterates or democracy of unwell-read people. So I would say yes for the policy. Another thing that is to be kept in mind is that reading in the present era is a trove for acquisition of knowledge and ideas from different sources. So not just well-read, well-seen is also to be kept in mind. The question that you raised about Bache Gujarat was primarily because a group of people wanted to change the perception of society of Gujarat. Because it was said that people in Gujarat read only passbooks and checkbooks. So the movement of society was to shift from passbook to books.
Real books.
Book reading society. And so this started from a small town called Navsari, where the people of society got together. And what they did was that they first of all revived an old Maharaja Sayaji Rao library that was in that town. And they had 17 initiatives running round the year and managing entire thing on their own without any government grant. And therefore, when this Golden Jubilee celebrations of Gujarat took place in 2010-11, then that model was scaled up at the state level. Now, there it was like, PPP model. Like in our country, we have 2-3 models already in existence. One is like, government sponsored, like NBT, say for instance, or Sahitya Academy. NBT in particular, because they are given the mandate of making the people of the country read and make good books available to them. So NVT was one. Second is like NGO's model, in which your Pratham or what Room to Read or Read Alliance and the Katha and all these initiatives, I think we can put in that. This was altogether different, where government role was limited to giving impetus to 2 things. Number one, there were books lying in the government warehouses, particularly printed and published under this Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. But nobody was reading those books. Why nobody was reading this book? The question was that these books have to be issued by somebody so that students or people can read. But if the books are issued, then whosoever issues will be questioned for non-retrieval of the book. So audit objection will be there. His salary and his pension might be stopped. So this group of people, they could convince the government and said that if a small circular is sent, that if the books are issued to students or to the people of society, and if they are not returned, no question will be asked by the government. And the reason was, with just one small, one piece of paper, the books were floating in the society. Then this way, many new initiatives like floating a book. Say for instance, I purchase a book, I read it and then I float it. So it goes from one person to another. And I was not in fact, directly involved with it. I was looking after Knowledge Consortium of Gujarat. So this was one of the initiatives that we were just doing our bit. There was already a group, Vache Gujarat, where the people not connected with government or any political party were heading it. So the government, people, and what they did was that they did incentivize reading. And incentivization of reading took place on the basis of number of books read, or the participation of students, or even the senior citizens. And for that, what they did, that book fairs were organized at small scales, even in talukas or tehsils. And there they gave vouchers to these people, that 1,000 rupees voucher you take, or 2,000 rupees voucher you take, and you go to the book fair and purchase the book that you want. And on one fine day, which was the last day, the entire state read, including the chief minister to education minister, to everybody. And that sent a good symbolic message. Not that, with the government machinery reading, everybody begins to read and that would be sustained. Not the whole of it could be sustained. But what happened was that day, the then chief minister, who happens to be the prime minister today, he said that the state should read and no prescription or proscription. Even if there is a book against me, that should be read. And that made this movement, Vache Gujarat, the least controversial movement, I think, in the history of the state.
Means least involvement of the state.
State. And he claimed that whatever the chief minister, the then chief minister said that whatever I begin, there is always some opposition. But in my political life, if there is a movement which has remained unquestioned, that has been this movement, Vache Gujarat or Read Gujarat. So this is the model Among others. I don't say that this is the only model. It should be Vache Tamil Nadu or Vache Tamil there, or it should be Vache Hindi, because it would vary from state to state.
Vanche Goa,
Vache Goa,
Vanche,
in different Indian languages.
Vanche Rajasthan.
Vache Rajasthan. The issue is that a policy would certainly give a lot of push to reading habits, and different models have to be worked out, and these models have to be incorporated in the policy to come, because different segments that are there, maybe I'll take them up later on. So this perhaps is something that I think this is a group where publishers are there, some authors also were here. I think there is need to have a kind of opinion, consensus built around this, and some inputs should be sent to the government. That it not for the sake of a certain segment, but for the sake of future of democracy, of literate people, this country needs.
Apoorvanand ji, I'd like you to comment on many issues that have been raised, and
critical comment.
yeah, I think there would be much to critique in this. I mean, I think it's very telling that Professor Avdhesh Kumar felt the need to mention that it was okay to read a book which said something against the Chief Minister. Why not? Why would we have to underline that in the first place? In any democratic society, a book may be written and anybody should be free to read it, right? But we know that, all these situations are developing situations, and in your experience of working where you have recommended things to the government, what has been your experience of recommendations being accepted, rejected, or distorted along the way?
First of all, I would like to thank Bookmark and Manisha and seek apology for choosing to speak in an Indian language. And I request you to translate it for the audience, because what I want to drive home is that this is the challenge before Indian publishing or Indian reading policy, that we are dealing with a multilingual society, and we are practically a nation of more than 1,600 languages, big or small, but all of them are important for people who speak them or who live in their languages. So allow me to speak in Hindi, and a short translation by Manisha. सबसे पहला सवाल यह है कि क्यों पढ़ें, और पढ़ना किसके लिए एक मीनिंगफुल एक्टिविटी है. मेरा ध्यान इस बात पर गया इंटरनेशनल बुक फेयर को सर्वे करते हुए कि किन स्टॉल्स पर सबसे ज़्यादा भीड़ है.
वो तो हिंदी में,
और नहीं, हिंदी में भी किन स्टॉल्स पर. और बदनसीबी से अब तक हमने इसका सर्वे नहीं किया है कि रीडिंग पब्लिक कौन है, तो हमें पता नहीं है कि हम किसको एड्रेस करें. मेरा यह एक अंदाज़ है कि अभी सबसे ज़्यादा पढ़ने की इच्छा दलितों में है और औरतों में है. क्योंकि अगर आप बुक फेयर चले जाएंगे, नेशनल बुक फेयर में, तो सबसे ज़्यादा भीड़ आपको गौतम बुक सेंटर पे मिलेगी, विच इज़ नॉट ए स्टेट पब्लिशिंग हाउस. गौतम बुक सेंटर जो दलित इश्यूज़ पर पब्लिकेशन करता है और सस्ते पब्लिकेशन करता है, उसकी किताबें सबसे ज़्यादा बिकती हैं. वो ये शिकायत नहीं करता है कि लोग किताब नहीं खरीद रहे हैं, जो कि बाकी प्राइवेट पब्लिशर शिकायत करते रहते हैं कि हम कैसे सस्टेन करेंगे. तो पहला कि पढ़ना किसके लिए मीनिंगफुल एक्टिविटी है, क्योंकि वो अपनी ज़िंदगी को समझना चाहते हैं और उसको बदलना चाहते हैं. दूसरा यह देखना कि कौन सा हिस्सा है जो दरअसल मीनिंगफुल एक्टिविटी के रूप में पढ़ने से विड्रॉ कर गया है. और मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि एक बड़ा हिस्सा हिंदुस्तान का इंडियन लैंग्वेजेस से विड्रॉ कर गया है, और उसका एरिया या उसका इलाका अंग्रेज़ी है, इसलिए वो बहुत इत्मीनान में है और उसको इसकी फ़िक्र भी नहीं है कि हिंदुस्तानी ज़ुबानों में क्या हो रहा है. जबकि हमारे पास जो उदाहरण हैं, अगर हम गुजरात के इसको छोड़ भी दें, महाराष्ट्र चले जाएं, बंगाल चले जाएं, असम चले जाएं, और आप बोडो साहित्य सभा के राष्ट्रीय सम्मेलन की संख्या देखिए। बोडो साहित्य सभा की जो का राष्ट्रीय सम्मेलन होता है उसमें तकरीबन 3 लाख लोग आते हैं बोडो साहित्य सम्मेलन के। उसी तरह असमिया साहित्य सम्मेलन के, आप बांग्ला साहित्य सम्मेलन को देख लें और मराठी साहित्य सम्मेलन को देख लें, कन्नड़ में भी और मलयालम में भी। तो इसका मतलब यह है कि रीडिंग वहाँ के कल्चर या वहाँ की संस्कृति का एक अनिवार्य हिस्सा है। लेकिन अगर हम शहरों को देख लें, और अभी तो स्मार्ट सिटी की बात हो रही है बहुत ज़्यादा, शहरों की प्लानिंग को देख लें, कॉलोनीज जब प्लान की जाती हैं तो उनमें हर चीज़ होती है। स्विमिंग पूल होता है, स्पा होता है, बाकी तमाम चीज़ें होती है, मॉल होता है, लेकिन उसमें बुक शॉप मैंने किसी कॉलोनी की प्लानिंग में नहीं देखी। आप कॉलोनीज़ को छोड़ दें, मैं दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी का हूँ जो देश की सबसे बड़ी यूनिवर्सिटी है। नॉर्थ कैंपस और साउथ कैंपस दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी में किताब की एक भी दुकान नहीं है। फोटोकॉपिंग की दुकान है, किताब की दुकान नहीं है। और फोटोकॉपिंग को लेकर एक पूरी बहस है कि क्या फोटोकॉपी होनी चाहिए या नहीं, और हम अध्यापकों में भी 2 हिस्सा है, जिसमें एक का यह कहना है कि क्यों नहीं आप किताबें ज़्यादा बड़ी संख्या में उपलब्ध करा सकते हैं, मुहैया करा सकते हैं छात्रों को। दूसरा, अगर इससे हटकर कि रीडिंग का मतलब हमारे यहाँ टेक्स्ट बुक रीडिंग तक रिड्यूस हो गया है। यानी जब भी हम रीडिंग पॉलिसी की बात करते हैं, रीडिंग पब्लिक की बात करते हैं, तो इसका मतलब है टेक्स्ट बुक पढ़ने वाली पब्लिक। तो हम पब्लिशिंग की जब बात करते हैं तो वो सिर्फ टेक्स्ट बुक्स की बात होती है, और स्कूल्स तक वो पूरी रीडिंग सीमित रहती है कि हम रीडिंग हैबिट इनकलकेट करना चाहते हैं, स्कूल गोइंग बच्चों में करना चाहते हैं, और इसका मतलब है हमारा ध्यान टेक्स्ट बुक्स पर होना चाहिए। अब इसमें जो दुर्घटना हुई है वो दुर्घटना यह है कि रीडिंग हमारे यहाँ हमेशा एक ऐसी गतिविधि है जो कुछ नेशनल वैल्यूज को लेकर चलती है। इसका मतलब आप यूं ही नहीं पढ़ सकते, मजे के लिए नहीं पढ़ सकते। आपको जब भी पढ़ना है उससे एक ऐसा भारी भरकम मतलब निकालना है जिसका कुछ वैल्यू होगा। तो अगर, और मैं एक कंपैरिजन करना चाहूँगा, नेशनल करिकुलम फ्रेमवर्क फॉर स्कूल एजुकेशन में काम करते हुए मैंने ये महसूस किया कि आप अंग्रेज़ी की किताबें उठाइए, स्कूल टेक्स्ट बुक्स ही उठा लीजिए, और हिंदी की स्कूल टेक्स्ट बुक्स उठाइए और कंपेयर कर लीजिए, कंटेंट एनालिसिस कर लीजिए। आप देखिएगा कि अंग्रेज़ी की किताबें घोस्ट स्टोरी छापने में कोई परहेज़ नहीं करती, नॉनसेंस राइम छापने में कोई परहेज़ नहीं करती। यहाँ तक कि बांग्ला की किताबें पहले नॉनसेंस राइम छापा करती थी। सुकुमार राय, सत्यजीत रे के पिता नॉनसेंस राइम लिखने के माहिर व्यक्ति थे। लेकिन अगर आप हिंदी और इंडियन लैंग्वेजेस में घोस्ट स्टोरी एक डाल दें तो इतना बड़ा हंगामा हो जाएगा, यहाँ तक कि राज्यसभा और लोकसभा भी हिल सकती है कि आप बच्चों को सुपरस्टिशन की तरफ ले जा रहे हैं। और आप नॉनसेंस राइम तो डाल ही नहीं सकते, क्योंकि बिना सेंस के बच्चा पढ़ ही नहीं सकता है। तो पढ़ना एक बहुत भारी भरकम गतिविधि है बच्चे के लिए, मजे की गतिविधि नहीं है। और जब तक वो मजे की गतिविधि नहीं है, सिर्फ मजे के लिए आप नहीं पढ़ सकते हैं। और इसका एक रिफ्लेक्शन आपको किताबों के डिजाइन में मिलता है। आप हमारे बच्चों के लिए छापी जाने वाली किताबें देख लीजिए, लेटर्स के अलावा उनमें शायद ही कुछ हो। हम तस्वीरें कितनी देते हैं, और कितनी तस्वीर देने का मतलब है कागज बर्बाद करना, और इसलिए ज्यादा से ज्यादा बिना रिलीफ के लेटर से भरी हुई किताबें बच्चों को दी जाती हैं, जिनसे फिर वो रिलेट ही नहीं कर सकते हैं। लेकिन अगर मैं अपने बचपन में लौटता हूं और अपनी बचपन की किताबों को देखना चाहता हूं, तो मुझे दिखता है कि उस वक्त की दुनिया अलग थी और अब की दुनिया बिल्कुल अलग है।
आने वाला दुनिया और अलग होगा।
तो हमें, जब हम आज यहाँ नेशनल रीडिंग पॉलिसी की बात कर रहे हैं, तो पहले तो रीडिंग एज अ सोशल एक्टिविटी, रीडिंग जो मीनिंग मेकिंग एक्टिविटी के रूप में है, रीडिंग फॉर प्लेजर कि वो सिर्फ आनंद के लिए है या नहीं, और उसको हम वैल्यू करते हैं कि नहीं करते हैं, और रीडिंग विद अंडरस्टैंडिंग। और तीसरे कि आप अगर रीडिंग को एक स्टेट स्पॉन्सर्ड एक्टिविटी में डाल दें तो उसके नुकसानात क्या हैं। मसलन प्रोफेसर अवधेश कुमार सिंह ने वांचे गुजरात के अपने अनुभव के बारे में बतलाया और उसके इरादे बहुत अच्छे थे, लेकिन जब मैं सर्व शिक्षा अभियान के मिड टर्म अप्रेजल में गया तो जो मुझे सरकार की तरफ से डॉक्यूमेंट दिया गया वो बहुत ही अच्छे इंटेंशन से भरा हुआ था, और जब मैं स्कूलों में पहुंचा तो वहाँ तस्वीर बिल्कुल अलग थी, क्योंकि वहाँ जो किताबें खरीदी जा रही थी वांचे गुजरात में वो बिल्कुल वही थी जो मुख्यमंत्री चाहते थे। तो और उन किताबों को पढ़ना नहीं पढ़ने से ज़्यादा खतरनाक था। यानी नहीं पढ़कर आप फिर भी एक समझदार इंसान बने रह सकते थे, लेकिन उन किताबों को पढ़कर फिर आपकी दुनिया ही बदल जाती। तो इसलिए मुझे हमेशा एक तरह का स्केप्टिसिज्म, अगर क्या हम स्टेट के हाथ में रीडिंग पॉलिसी डाल दें या रीडिंग पॉलिसी को एक पब्लिक ड्रिवन एक्टिविटी रहने दें जैसे कि वो पहले थी। और चूंकि हम ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा, मुझे ऐसा लगता है हमारी समस्या ये है कि हम एक स्टेटिस्ट सोसाइटी हो गए हैं, और इसलिए हम प्राइवेट इनिशिएटिव्स को
encourage नहीं करते।
बहुत घबराहट और नफरत के साथ देखते हैं, और हर चीज़ पर हम स्टेट पर डिपेंड कर रहे हैं। लेकिन स्टेट पे डिपेंड करने का ख़तरा यह है कि रीडिंग एक तरह की रेजिमेंटेड एक्टिविटी भी हो सकती है, उसकी डाइवर्सिटी घट सकती है, और जैसा मैंने कहा कि वो एक प्लेजरेबल एक्टिविटी नहीं रह जाएगी। तो मेरे सामने सिर्फ ये कुछ सवाल हैं जिनको मैं रखना चाहता था।
धन्यवाद अपूर्वानंद जी, बहुत से सवाल आपने दिए हैं, और ये सवाल जो हैं आई थिंक दे अंडरपिन many of the things that were said earlier. If we go back to what Professor Avdhesh Kumar said about creating a democratic society with the help of reading, I think a lot of things that Professor Apoorvanand brought up, actually if we make it a regimented state-driven activity, there is a danger of merely ticking a box of doing a social good, but the intention behind it is not actually encouraging the democratic impulse. And I think the very well taken point is also that we've always associated books with the very big word called gyan, and we always think of reading as a very worthy activity, which is not then therefore very pleasurable. And until it's made pleasurable and we are comfortable with the diversity of what we should read, what we can read, and what we might do after we read it, we are never going to be really comfortable with encouraging reading in the broadest sense. We will always look upon it as an activity which is to be looked at in the framework of education, or being more worthy, of being more employable, or being, being readied for competition, etc., and so on. So if we really need to look at, pardon me. If we really need to look at all that reading can possibly bring to the democratic table, we really need to examine how much the state should play a role in it. Can it be merely an enabler, or will it actually go further and drive policy in particular directions, which again militates against the idea of democracy and diversity? I think that to carry that further in a multilingual scenario, that is always going to leave out certain languages. It is always going to leave out certain marginalized sections of society. We can do one quick round where everybody else can express a quick thought each, and after that we have very little time. I can see my young friend signaling to me frantically, saying we have 10 minutes, after which we can open it up for questions. So Oliver, if you would like to add anything to what you shared earlier in the light of whatever you heard. I know we couldn't do a good translation for you, but
I don't think I'm anyway in a position to comment very much on the situation in India, as it's so different and so complex. But I think what you're saying is the most important is that to have a functional democracy, you need a reading and critical public, and I think to bring reading to the people, you have to. We've been talking earlier today about telling stories. Books are about telling stories. So make it start where people are. People love stories, and make it accessible to them. Make them discover that reading is pleasure.
And they should be not one meta-narrative that we all contribute to, but many stories.
Of course, as many as possible, and then there should be no one telling people what to read and censor what should be in the books. It should be, of course, it should be from everyone and for everyone.
Professor Avdhesh, Kumar, if you'd like to quickly add some remarks to that.
Couple of things that I like to add. One is that since we are thinking about policy, we need to give a serious thought to it. One is what Apoorvanand ji said. I agree with it, but I also have other view that once people begin to read, then reading goes as an activity. It goes out of the control of whatever segment of society it might be there. So people should read. That's important. You can't condition it for long or control it for long. Second thing is that for a policy like this, the very fundamental principle should be that every adult Indian should be literate. And every literate Indian should read or should have access to books. Equally important it is that all segments, be it a linguistic group or challenged community or whatever it is, should be part of this. They should be included in this. When we think of it, then we have to think of alternative pedagogies also. People who are illiterate. How yesterday I think Niyam Bhushan ji, he was mentioning that and it was a very good point, like people who are illiterate, if instead of making them literate so that they can read, it is possible to think of some different kind of books, e-books or AV books, so that they can enjoy the content. Container is not, what he said was, container is not important, content is. So this policy has to think of that as well. Book purchase has to be put in place, wherein central or state government can support these activities, because ultimately some money is needed for the purchase of books. I said it then, and I again reiterate it, that no single model can work in a country like India. We are too vast to be governed by one particular policy. There may be guidelines or framework of guidelines. Every state can work out specifics on their own. So this PPP model that I was working, that I didn't say that this is the mandatory model. NGO, government, PPP model, and equal pressure or consensus needs to be built so that all segments of society start working towards it.
Mr. Sikandar, quickly, we just have 5 minutes.
I entirely agree with the panelist, because India is a vast country with diversification, language. Because in NBT I found last 3.5 years a lot of things. Once if I go to Tripura, this is in a small state, but we put up a small book fair. The whole district is schools are declared holiday, and all the teachers and students are taking a book march. And in Delhi, I am running around. Day before yesterday, the secretary donor, the Department of Northeastern region, was talking. They want to talk about a festival like JLF, and can we bring their support to? They want to start a Northeast festival. The first thing they come to the Northeast people is books and bringing authors. And sometime in some state we are talking, can we organize a rock show? But the things, it's not in a cultural fest. They means there is rock show. For some state it is books, reading, authors, some seminar. So it is the regionalism which makes it is in a culture, because what I want to say is the reading habits was prevailing 2 decades back, 3 decades back. But now we have reached in a very comfort zone. And we are, even our schools, somewhat the schools, the focus is missing. So how many teachers they read a book? When I was a school boy, and every day we are waiting what the teacher would be coming with a novel, new novel. We try to note down, and we go search for in a second-hand books or find out the book is available or not. So the curiosity. Even wherever I go, I tell people, the children are confused with the, very confused with the information, with the knowledge. They know, they think everything is in their hands. They can get access to everything. But it is, pathetic. But what I want to say is that some government has to highlight some policy, which should a guided policy with a less and less control. But some money is to be pumped into market, where the publisher will, what will print. But what they want to buy, the state government, they should not regulate it. Better it should be left to the academia or the committee or the people. I completely agree with you. It can be, if the total funding is given, only NBT books is to be bought, only NCRT book bought. I'm not supporting that. But at the same time, when you are buying some book, at least 10%, 20% books, because we publish the biography and non-textbooks also. We can.
We have very little time for questions.
Apoorvanand
ji,
1 minute.
okay.
मैं सिर्फ ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि रीडिंग को डिफेंड करने की भी ज़रूरत है। मसलन जब वेंडी डोनेगर की किताब पल्प हो जाती है या ए.के. रामानुजन का ऐसे विड्रॉ हो जाता है, तो रीडिंग एक हार्मलेस एक्टिविटी के रूप में प्रमोट की जाती है, जिसमें आप सिर्फ वे चीज़ें पढ़ें जो कहीं से आपको नुकसान नहीं पहुँचाती हैं। तो रीडिंग as a critical activity needs to be defended from publishers. Publishers खड़े नहीं हुए वेंडी डोनेगर के पक्ष में, publishers खड़े नहीं हुए रामानुजन के पक्ष में। तो जब ये नहीं हुआ, इसका मतलब publishers के लिए यह एक ऐसी चीज़ नहीं थी जिसमें कुछ बेसिक फंडामेंटल चीज़ दांव पे लगी हुई थी। वे कुछ भी पब्लिश कर सकते हैं। अगर एक किसी खास चीज़ को ख़तरनाक कहा जा सकता है तो उसे छोड़ सकते हैं। जैसे ही आप ये करते हैं, वैसे ही आप रीडिंग एक क्रिटिकल और मीनिंगफुल एक्टिविटी के रूप में उसे ताबूत पर उसकी कील ठोंक देते हैं। मैं सिर्फ यही कहना चाहता हूँ।
It's not all the case, the publisher, even the writer side also. So. Please, please.
Okay, this is the only question.
Okay. So it's a very good one. This is the input. 30 years ago, computers were just computers until Steve Jobs stepped in and added the complete works of Shakespeare onto the next computer, along with a 160,000 word dictionary. Today we have trite and useless wallpapers, ringtones pushed into every phone in India. It is so easy to create a policy or a mandate or an option or a suggestion that every mobile phone being sold in India, by region you can do analytics, should also include free e-books, let's say, from Pratham of the local regional languages, let's say the complete works of Tagore and Kalidas, and let it be, and you can also have an audiobook version of it, so that somebody can look at the book as well as listen to it and get into the habit of reading. Because there is no policy in stopping us from reading useless spam SMS, which we get all the time. So why don't we use it in the opposite way and bring reading to at least 60 million people who will discover smartphones in the next 1 year alone? It was just a suggestion.
Just 2 seconds. Can we not suggest it that even in the income tax provisions, the people who purchase books, there should be some kind of some exemptions, particularly so that at least the people who are really rich, they can support even mobile libraries. But once it is incentivized, then they will come forward.
So why can't we have in a mall? We are creating so many malls. Why can't we have in a small section book malls? Why should we go to every time we are Old Delhi and waiting for Sunday?
But we need to state it categorically, I think, in some way, in a documented form.
So, but our budgets also go unspent to the tune of about 30-35% each year, and claiming about 40% to be short of what is required to change the situation. Then what do you do?
Right. So I think
when they make budget, they keep in mind 20 to 30% will be unutilized. So they keeping in mind.
No, I agree with Professor Apoorvanand. I've had hands-on experience in Jaipur, in the education department here, Shabdan, UNICEF, Save the Children, Publication Division, National Book Trust, so many people, district librarians, except for pleasure, the procurement of books was about everything. except for pleasure.
Right. So you're talking about ethical and appropriate books being purchased
Yeah.
with the money that is allocated.
33,000 rupees available to them to each school each year. In the high school, there are no bookshops in places like Jaipur. Where will you spend 33,000 rupees? Or district librarian, where will you spend?
Right. So I think, in this session we've covered so much ground that it's practically impossible to sum it up in any sensible way. It's very clear that the book policy needs to sort of keep morphing as we grow as a society and we have more conversations around reading, whether it's going to be within the framework of an official policy or a policy which has room for improvement and growth continuously. That remains to be seen, but there is certainly a case for setting a framework where various people from civil society, publishing and education, as well as thinkers, as well as people who bring in the money to support it. Again, I don't think it's always about the money. I like we said that money often remains unspent, but the policy should at least put into place conversations.
If the money is with government, it is unspent. If the money is non-government, it is fully spent.
Actually, no. In our experience as a non-government organization, we very often find that the corporates are just as lost as the government.
Outside of the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, in Rajasthan, there is an executive of the Rajasthan Prakashak Sangh who sits outside of the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan office to see that the vested interest of the Rajasthan publishers is taken care of. No publisher from outside of Rajasthan can come and grab the business available to the state.
So perhaps the policy needs to take into account that, such vested interests don't always prevail. I think the hallmark of a good session is that people still want to talk and we have to declare it closed. So,
Everybody give a round of applause to our panelists for a national book policy.